At work, everyone envies me. They talk about how lucky I am to have such a loving wife who makes me incredible lunches. Your lunchboxes make me happy every single day. Those words from my husband made my chest tighten painfully. I stared at his empty lunchbox and my vision blurred as tears welled up. For 13 years, I have been waking up at 5 a.m. every morning to lovingly prepare his meals. Carefully, I packed each item, imagining the smile on his face as he opened the lid. But now time seemed to crawl painfully slowly. My husband's casual gestures felt oddly carefree, creating a sense of unease. I fought the nausea rising from the pit of my stomach, forcing a cheerful expression. Inside me, something fragile began to crumble. What had once been the highlight of my mornings, planning his meals while thinking of his happiness, felt utterly meaningless. My hands trembled. Did Ryan notice how my heart was breaking into pieces at that moment? His oblivious demeanor, devoid of guilt, sent a chill through me. And then his next words sliced through the air like a knife. My name is Chelsea and I'm 42 years old. I live with my husband Ryan, 44, and our 10-year-old son Ken. The house we live in was originally my childhood home. When we got married, Ryan and I decided to renovate this house and make it our new beginning. It was a hopeful, exciting decision. But the burden of the mortgage fell almost entirely on me. Ryan was aware of the mortgage, but I was the one responsible for most of the repayments. It's your family home, so that's only natural, right? His casual remark left me speechless and deeply frustrated. Despite everything, this house holds precious memories of my family. To preserve those memories, I took on the responsibility of working while paying off the loan. Before Ken was born, I worked as a designer. However, balancing childcare and work became impossible, so I left my career to focus on being a homemaker. Supporting the family as a full-time housewife was challenging, but rewarding. When Ken entered elementary school, I returned to the workforce as an office clerk. Working and managing household responsibilities simultaneously has never been easy, but contributing to the family's finances was essential. My marriage to Ryan started out happy. It was a love marriage, and our newlywed life was filled with affection. Ryan was kind and always listened earnestly to my thoughts. But as the years passed, things began to change. Ryan became increasingly absorbed in his work, using his busyness as an excuse to avoid housework or parenting duties. When I tried to talk to him, he often brushed me off, saying, "I'm too tired right now." Perplexed by the shift in his behavior, I endured it for the sake of our family. Ryan's mother, Heather, lives alone in her home. Unable to shake off my suspicions, I decided to call Jack for confirmation. Heather doted excessively on Ryan, fostering an unhealthy attachment to him. Jack's ex-wife had also struggled with Heather's toxic behavior, eventually divorcing him. I still remember my father-in-law asking me, "Please take care of my sons," shortly before his passing. His words carried an unspoken warning about his wife's personality. Heather frequently made snide remarks to me. "You're making my son's life harder," she would say every time I visited her home. Her words made visiting my in-laws a dreaded chore. Ryan, instead of standing by me, always sided with her. "Mom's just lonely." He failed to see how deeply her barbs hurt me. Ryan even supported her financially, claiming she couldn't survive on her pension alone. Yet I knew she squandered money recklessly. Still, she painted me as an ignorant daughter-in-law who didn't understand the hardships of raising a child alone. This allowed her to manipulate Ryan and justify withholding adequate living expenses from me. As a result, I've been shouldering most of the household expenses. Kent, our son, began to withdraw emotionally after witnessing his father and grandmother's behavior. He chose to spend more time with me, gradually opening up only to me. "Mom, are you okay?" His gentle voice became my source of strength. Kent joined a soccer team and practiced diligently every day. When he returned home exhausted, I would cook his favorite meals like curry and hamburgers. "Mom, your lunchboxes are always delicious." His smile and words were the only validation of my efforts. Meanwhile, Ryan remained oblivious to our son's smiles, lounging around watching TV at home. Watching him, I sometimes felt a deep emptiness. Still, my desire to protect his family kept me holding on. One day, I went to cheer for Kent at his soccer tournament. That day, I unexpectedly ran into Heather. Spotting her waving from the corner of the field, a sharp pain stabbed at my chest. We rarely saw each other, but she showed up for Kent's big day. "Chelsea, it's been a while." She approached me with a smile. Her tone seemed friendly, but her next words quickly pulled me back to reality. "By the way, your cooking is still as terrible as ever, isn't it?" I felt as if my heart skipped a beat. Her words hit me like a bucket of cold water poured over my back. For a moment, I thought about retorting, but my throat tightened and no words came out. "Your seasoning is too bland. Do you only know how to cook vegetables?" Her voice was pitched just loud enough for nearby parents to overhear, calculated to wound me without being overtly confrontational. I bit my lip, trying to maintain my composure. I need to focus on Kent's game, I told myself, but none of the match registered in my mind. I could vaguely see Kent chasing the ball on the pitch. How long had it been since Heather last tasted my cooking? Shortly after our marriage, I was summoned to my in-laws' home to cook for Heather, Ryan, and Jack. Back then, I didn't know how to interact with her, so I hoped to please her through my cooking. But that wish was swiftly crushed. She took one bite of my food and spat out, "I can't eat this." The next moment, I heard the clattering sound of the entire pot being dumped into the sink. The sound overlapped with the shattering of my heart. Just recalling that moment made my chest tighten painfully. Not knowing what I'd done wrong, I desperately started cooking again. Hands trembling, sweating in the kitchen, I gripped the knife and recut the ingredients. Meanwhile, she sat in the living room watching TV, occasionally glancing over with a thin smile. When I finally served the remade dishes, she pinched her nose in mock disgust. "I can't believe I have to eat this." Her words made my hands shake. She raised her voice further, yelling, "Learn how to cook properly." Her harsh scolding etched deep fear into me. It felt as if my very existence was a sin. I stood there paralyzed. I cast a pleading glance at Ryan, but he just looked down silently. Instead of empathizing with me, he simply avoided his mother's wrath. "Why won't you help me?" I wanted to scream, but swallowed the words. Realizing that saying anything would be futile, the space around me suddenly felt suffocatingly small. The loneliness I felt then remains with me to this day. The memory of her yelling and the sound of the pot being discarded continues to haunt me. Later, Jack spoke to me. My ex-wife went through the same thing. She couldn't take it anymore. Sadness flickered in his eyes. His words were my only solace. Knowing that his ex-wife had been driven to divorce because of Heather made me yearn to distance myself from that household. "Chelsea, you don't have to force yourself to visit. Put yourself first." His kind words touched my heart. Yet despite his concern, Heather remained unchanged. She stared intently at me before suddenly saying something outrageous. "Ryan told me you're taking all his salary." My mind went blank. I felt the gazes of the surrounding parents shift toward us. They didn't say anything, but their eyes clearly showed surprise and pity. Why is she lying? I wanted to confront her, but held back. Arguing here might provoke her to make an even bigger scene. Forcing a calm exterior, I decided to let it pass. But inside, turmoil raged. Why would she say such things? I wondered. Could she be developing dementia? Her statements were so disconnected from reality that the thought crossed my mind. If she truly had dementia, it might explain her erratic behavior. Perhaps Ryan had noticed something as well. After returning home, I decided to ask Ryan directly. "Ryan, is your mother showing signs of dementia?" My heart pounded as I voiced the question, fearing his reaction. My apprehension proved justified. Ryan's face stiffened, an uncharacteristic display of emotion for him. "That's ridiculous. Mom's perfectly fine." He raised his voice, almost shouting. His intensity made me step back involuntarily. His expression was a mix of anger and something to hide. Ryan usually remained composed. This outburst was unusual. "Why are you so upset?" I thought. Had I touched on something forbidden? His extreme reaction amplified the unease I'd been feeling. Was it really dementia, or was Ryan hiding something else? I debated whether to press further, but chose to hold my tongue. Ryan was definitely concealing something, but confronting him might lead to unpredictable consequences. What is Ryan hiding? The question grew within me. Unable to shake off my suspicions, I decided to call my brother-in-law for confirmation. He sounded surprised when I brought it up. "Mom has dementia? No, I've noticed nothing like that." He added, "Ryan only visits her occasionally." His words deepened my doubts about Ryan. What's he hiding? Why does he get so agitated when his mother is mentioned? "Chelsea, be careful. Ryan's behavior seems off." His cautionary words rang alarm bells in my mind. Perhaps it was time to uncover whatever Ryan was hiding. Recently, I started noticing changes in Kent's behavior. After returning from school, he often seemed preoccupied with a troubled expression. He spoke less, giving curt replies like nothing when I asked about his day. Normally, he would talk excitedly about soccer or school events. Concerned, I decided not to press him too hard and waited for him to open up. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I noticed Kent standing silently by the kitchen door. He seemed hesitant, as if he wanted to say something. "What's wrong? Did you finish your homework?" He remained silent for a moment, then spoke in a small voice. "Mom." His voice carried a hint of uncertainty. I set down the knife I was holding and turned to him. "Did something happen?" Gently encouraging him, I waited for him to continue. Lowering his gaze, he finally began to speak. "The other day, I saw Dad skipping work." His words stunned me, tightening my chest with a sudden ache. "What do you mean?" Kent looked conflicted, glancing at me briefly before continuing. On soccer practice day, Dad drove somewhere else. He said it was work, but his office isn't in that direction. My unease deepened. When was this? Last Saturday. I saw it before I left for practice. His words felt like a trigger, setting off alarms in my mind. Ryan had told me he had to work that day. Suddenly, I questioned the recent increase in his weekend overtime. Thank you for telling me, Kent. Always let me know if something bothers you. I ruffled his hair, grateful for his honesty, but the seed of doubt in my heart continued to grow. That night, when Ryan returned home, I watched him more closely than usual. Every time the word overtime crossed my mind, Kent's words resurfaced. Where had Ryan gone? Was he really working? My suspicions grew with each passing moment. Shortly afterward, Kent was selected to play as a regular on his soccer team. Mom, I made the starting lineup. His announcement filled me with mixed emotions, surprise and pride. Really? That's amazing. His face lit up with pride, and his smile warmed my heart. Seeing his smile, I felt a wave of warmth and pride rise within me. My son, still in elementary school, had earned a spot among older players. I knew how much effort he had put into reaching this milestone. Despite the tough practices, he had always said, Mom, I'll try my best, gritting his teeth and persevering. This opportunity was a testament to his hard work. I'm looking forward to your special lunch on game day. His excitement inspired me to start planning the perfect lunch for him. Then I'll make you something extra special. The thought of his delighted face motivated me. I began planning. How sweet should the omelet be? What types of fried foods should I include? I wanted the colors to be vibrant, so I decided to add more vegetables. As the match approached, I became more and more determined. The night before, I carefully shopped for the ingredients. Standing in the kitchen, I imagined Kent's joy as I prepared each dish. On the morning of the match, I woke up early to cook, carefully preparing each item. The omelet came out fluffy and golden. The fried items were perfectly crisp, a beautiful golden brown. Vibrant broccoli and cherry tomatoes added pops of color to the lunchbox. With Mom's lunch, I'll definitely play my best. His innocent words warmed my heart. Knowing my food gave him strength made me happier than anything. I worked hard on this, so you give it your all too, Kent. As I handed him the lunchbox, its weight felt symbolic. It wasn't just food inside, it was my love, my hopes, and my unwavering belief in his potential. I asked Ryan to join us as the match to cheer for Kent. Kent got selected for the starting lineup. It'd be great for the whole family to support him. Ryan's face showed brief surprise before he looked away. Sorry, but I've got overtime that day. Hearing those words, my shoulders slumped slightly. I see. If it's work, then I guess it can't be helped. I tried to sound understanding, but a sense of loneliness spread through my chest. I knew how much it would mean to Kent to have his father there cheering him on. Still, Ryan used work as an excuse to decline. I wanted to ask, is it really work? But swallow the question. Bringing it up might cause unnecessary friction. Instead, I told myself it can't be helped, trying to find some justification. Deep down, I realized his absence wasn't just about being busy. Match day arrived under a clear, sunny sky. Kent stood on the field, dressed in his soccer uniform. He looked a little taller than usual, standing confidently. The whistle blew, signaling the start of the match. Kent worked seamlessly with his teammates, skillfully handling the ball. Go, Kent! I shouted encouragement, and though he didn't look back, he kept chasing the ball. He received a pass, dodged the opposing defenders, and moved toward the goal. And then the net shook as he scored. The sound of the ball hitting the net made me leap to my feet, clapping wildly. Yes! Goal! Kent's play was more impressive than I had imagined. When the final whistle blew, Kent ran toward me, drenched in sweat. Mom, I scored a goal! His smile radiated confidence and joy. I hugged him tightly. You were amazing. I'm so proud of you. As I held him, tears welled up in my eyes, though I managed to hold them back. It's all thanks to your lunch, Mom. His words warmed my heart, knowing my efforts had fueled his success. Later, we sat on a bench, sharing a quiet moment together. It's a shame Dad couldn't make it, isn't it? I spoke softly, feeling slightly guilty. I don't care. I don't need him. His words surprised me, but I understood his feelings. Ryan had rarely spent time with Kent since he was young. He had never watched his practices or played with him at home. Despite this, Kent never complained and instead cherished the time he spent with me. I like it better when it's just you and me, Mom. His words filled my chest with warmth, affirming the bond we shared. That evening, Ryan returned home as usual. Thanks for the great lunch. Everyone at work raves about it. Smiling, he handed me his lunchbox at the door. Hearing those words should have made me happy after 13 years of making his meals. But instead, something felt off. As I took the lunchbox, I asked casually, what kind of things do they say? They're amused at how great your lunches are. His tone was light, as usual. For some reason, his attitude left me uneasy. Without thinking, I opened the lunchbox to check inside. What I found froze me in place. Inside was a handkerchief. A woman's handkerchief. White with embroidered flowers. It was nothing like anything I owned. My heart raced, pounding so hard I thought it might stop. My palms began to sweat as I reached for the handkerchief with trembling hands. What is this? My voice came out, strained and quiet. Ryan froze, his eyes widening in shock. His short response was laced with unmistakable panic. His expression changed, and a terrible suspicion grew in my heart. Why is something like this in your lunchbox? I held the handkerchief up to him, my voice trembling. His eyes darted away, and his face showed visible distress. Oh, I don't know. I have no idea how it got there. His explanation lacked any credibility. Don't lie to me. My voice grew sharper, though it quivered with emotion. I wasn't sure if I was afraid of hearing more lies or discovering the truth. I swear I don't know, he stammered, his panic evident as he struggled to find words. Where were you today? My question caused his face to drain of color. Nowhere, I was at work. His frantic denial only heightened my suspicions. I couldn't hold back anymore. I already know everything. Stop hiding it. Ryan's shoulders slumped, his fight visibly draining from him. He sank into a chair, his voice weak as he finally confessed. I've been seeing someone else for about a year now. The words felt surreal, as if they couldn't possibly be true. What did you just say? I stared at him, refusing to believe what I had heard. I started dating a coworker about a year ago. He lowered his head, gripping the edge of the chair tightly. His demeanor made it clear he wasn't lying this time. My mind went blank. It felt like everything I had built over the years was crumbling around me. I had woken up every morning for 13 years to make him loving meals. Now all of that seemed meaningless. My hands trembled as I opened the lunchbox further. Inside was a small note written in elegant handwriting. The words, stark in black ink, pierced through me. How dare you send me such greasy food? Are you trying to make me sick? My mind raced as the pieces began to fall into place. I reread the note repeatedly, hoping it was some cruel mistake. The realization hit me like a blow. I had been making these lunches for Ryan's affair. My carefully crafted meals were being handed to his mistress. What had Ryan been eating? The truth struck me hard. He had been eating food prepared by her, not me. My heart ached, an unbearable pain spreading through my chest. 13 years of devotion, of waking up at dawn to prepare meals filled with love and care. All of it had been betrayed in the most demeaning way. The lunchbox for Kent's big game had been special, designed to energize him. That very lunchbox handed to Heather had been ridiculed and discarded. Meanwhile, Ryan stood by, indifferent to the humiliation. A mix of anger, sorrow, and emptiness swirled within me. How could something so lovingly made be used to deceive me? What was my 13 years of effort for? The thought stabbed at me, cutting deeper than I could bear. I forced myself to stay calm even as my emotions churned violently. This wasn't something I could overlook. A small flame of determination ignited within me, growing steadily stronger. Ryan left the house the next day after a silent, tense morning. He packed his belongings without a word, moving boxes into a corner. I watched him, not saying anything. Perhaps I had no word left, or maybe I felt speaking was futile. 13 years of marriage ended that day without fanfare or resolution. I'm going now. At the doorway, he spoke briefly. Okay. My response was devoid of emotion, no sadness, no anger. As the door closed behind him, the sound felt like the final punctuation to our relationship. For a moment, I stood there unable to think. Minutes later, I took a deep breath, resolving to move forward. A week passed, and the house felt different without Ryan. The once tense atmosphere was replaced with calm and quiet. Life with Kent, just the two of us, felt surprisingly natural and comforting. Our meals became more relaxed, and Kent seemed happier. Mom, guess what? Coach praised me during practice today. His excitement brought a smile to my face. Without Ryan, Kent appeared more at ease, and so did I. Meanwhile, my mind was occupied with practical matters. Papers and notes from my lawyer cluttered the dining table. Evidence, documentation, and legal advice had to be meticulously reviewed. Whenever memories of Ryan's betrayal or Heather's cruelty resurfaced, I took a deep breath. I can't let them control me anymore, I reminded myself. Finally, I was acting on my own terms, moving forward for myself and Kent. Slowly but surely, a sense of confidence began to grow within me. I realized that my endurance and efforts over the years had not been in vain. The newfound peace in our home was a sign of a fresh start. One day, the doorbell rang unexpectedly in the middle of a weekday. Surprised, I paused for a moment. It was unusual for someone to visit at this time. I checked the intercom and saw Heather's face on the screen. Her neatly styled hair and sharp eyes made my chest tighten. I need to talk to you. Her voice was as assertive as ever, carrying through the intercom. I took a deep breath to steady myself before opening the door. Hello, please come in. I kept my tone polite and neutral despite the warning bells in my mind. Heather stepped inside without hesitation, showing no sign of the courtesy one might expect from a guest. Once in the living room, she sat down without waiting for an invitation. Would you like some tea? No need, this won't take long. Her curt response made my unease grow. After a moment of silence, she spoke, her tone firm and accusatory. You need to stop this nonsense about divorce. Her words sparked a small flicker of anger within me. I maintained my composure, knowing that losing my temper wouldn't help. That decision is not yours to make. My voice was calm, but carried a subtle edge. Heather's gaze turned icy, her expression filled with disdain. I will not let someone like you take my son away from me. Her words struck me like a blade, cutting deep into old wounds. For 13 years I have sacrificed so much to support this family, yet here she was, dismissing my efforts as if they meant nothing. Anger welled up within me, but I forced myself to remain calm. It's too late. The divorce proceedings are already underway. I spoke firmly, refusing to let her intimidate me. Heather's face twisted in shock and frustration. Men stray. It's natural. Why make such a fuss? Her raised voice made my heart race, but I stood my ground. Just forgive and forget. Stop embarrassing yourself and my son. Her words pierced me, each one more demeaning than the last. Forgive and forget? Should I also forgive how my meals were passed to his mistress? My words escaped before I could stop them, cutting through the air like a whip. For a moment, Heather froze, her sharp gaze faltering. The silence was brief but heavy, filled with unspoken tension. That's irrelevant. Her voice was less confident now, her words stumbling. I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes as she tried to redirect the conversation. Forget about that. Kent needs his father. He should live with Ryan. Her words made something snap inside me. 13 years of humiliation, neglect, and sacrifice boiled to the surface. This house is my inheritance. Kent and I will live here. That is non-negotiable. My voice was steady and resolute, every word deliberate. Heather's eyes widened in shock, her composure cracking for the first time. I had never seen her react like this, and it gave me a sense of quiet triumph. At that moment, Kent entered the room, his expression confused and wary. What's going on? Kent, you need to live with your father. A boy needs his dad. Her voice echoed sharply, filling the room. Kent froze, his small frame trembling slightly. Kent, it's okay. No one is taking you away. I tried to reassure him, but before I could say more, he raised his voice. No, I want to stay with Mom. His words were clear and defiant, carrying the strength of his emotions. Dad doesn't care about me. He didn't even come to my game. Tears welled up in his eyes as he spoke, his small body trembling. His words left Heather speechless, her mouth opening and closing with no sound. Mom is the only one who's always there for me. I don't need Dad. His voice cracked, but his resolve was unwavering. I felt my chest tighten with pride and sorrow as I watched him speak his truth. Heather's face contorted as Kent's words sank in. She tried to regain her composure, but was visibly shaken. Kent, you don't understand. A father is important. No, he's not. Not if he doesn't care about me or Mom. Kent interrupted her, his voice rising with frustration. Tears streamed down his cheeks, but he stood firm, staring directly at her. Mom is the one who helps me, listens to me, and loves me. I only need her. His declaration left no room for argument. Heather opened her mouth to respond, but seemed at a loss for words. I gently placed my hand on Kent's shoulder, feeling his body tremble. Thank you, Kent. I'm proud of you for speaking your heart. I turned to Heather, my tone calm, yet unyielding. Kent has made his decision. Forcing him into a situation he doesn't want would be wrong and illegal. My words struck a chord and she visibly recoiled. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Kent's sniffles. Heather's confident facade crumbled further as she stared at the floor. For a moment she seemed unsure of what to do. Finally she spoke, her voice quieter than I had ever heard it. Fine, if that's how it has to be. Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time she looked defeated. The tension in the room began to dissipate as she rose from her chair. But don't come crying to me when you realize how hard life is without Ryan. Her parting words were bitter, but they lacked the venom they usually carried. She turned and left without another word, leaving the house in heavy silence. As soon as the door closed, Kent threw his arms around me, clinging tightly. I don't want to leave you, Mom. Ever. His words brought tears to my eyes, and I held him close. You won't, Kent. I promise. In that moment, I realized just how much strength my son gave me. We stayed like that for a while, finding comfort in each other's presence. In the following days, I finalized the divorce proceedings. My lawyer helped me secure child support and alimony. With the evidence of Ryan's infidelity and the betrayal involving the lunches, there was no contest. The settlement also included stipulations ensuring Kent's custody remained solely with me. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders as the legal matters concluded. Ryan tried to appeal for leniency at one point. I made a mistake, but I shouldn't lose everything. His plea was hollow, and I felt nothing but detachment as I heard him. The court's decision was clear, and he had no choice but to comply. Kent and I began our new life together, just the two of us. The house felt lighter, filled with a newfound peace. Each morning I woke up without the burden of making lunch for someone who didn't appreciate it. Instead, I spent time focusing on myself and Kent, building a life where we could thrive. Life gradually began to stabilize for Kent and me. Without Ryan's presence, the house felt calm and safe. Kent's smile became more frequent, a reflection of the peace we had found. I took time to focus on myself, something I hadn't done in years. Mornings were no longer rushed with the pressure of preparing elaborate lunches. Instead, I spent my time exploring new hobbies and interests. Kent thrived in his soccer team, his confidence growing with every game. One day, Kent approached me, his eyes bright with excitement. "Mom, the coach said I might get scouted for a bigger team." "That's amazing, Kent. I'm so proud of you." His happiness was contagious, and I felt a swell of pride in his accomplishments. My own career also took a turn for the better. I have reconnected with my passion for design and started freelancing. The work was fulfilling, and the flexibility allowed me to support Kent fully. One evening, as I worked at my desk, Kent came to sit beside me. "Mom, do you like your work now?" "I do. It feels good to do something I'm passionate about again." "I'm glad. You're really talented." His words touched me deeply, reaffirming my decision to prioritize our happiness. Occasionally, Kent and I talked about the past, but the focus was always on moving forward. We supported each other, our bond stronger than ever. My relationship with Ryan and his family became nothing more than a distant memory. I learned through mutual acquaintances that Ryan struggled to rebuild his life. His affair had ended, and he faced financial difficulties after the divorce. Meanwhile, Heather had become increasingly isolated. Her once commanding presence faded as she dealt with the fallout of her actions. These updates didn't affect me. I had moved past their influence. One sunny afternoon, Kent and I went to his soccer match. I prepared a lunchbox for him, filled with his favorite foods. He beamed as he took it, his enthusiasm lighting up the day. "Thanks, Mom. You're the best." Watching him play on the field, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was the life I wanted, a life where I could support my son and feel proud of the choices I made. As I watched Kent score another goal, I whispered to myself, "We're going to be just fine." That moment marked a new chapter, filled with hope and strength.